Okay, so you're thinking about reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
Right.
Big buzz, awards, best of lists.
Yeah,
But is it really worth your time?
right.
That's what we're here to figure out. We've got an expert who's read it cover to cover,
Yeah.
and we're going to do a deep dive to see if it's the right book for you.
Absolutely.
No spoilers, just honest insights.
Well, and I can tell you right off the bat, I did enjoy it.
Okay.
But enjoy can mean a lot of things, right? So we're going to unpack what works, what might not, and who this book is really for.
Perfect, because that's what I'm always wondering. Who is this book really for?
It's a great question. I think it's really going to resonate with people who love stories about complicated friendships.
Mm.
The kind that span decades, have ups and downs, weather, all sorts of storms.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a gamer to appreciate this book, but if you're interested in the creative process, especially in the world of video game design, I think you'll find a lot to connect with.
Okay, that piques my interest. I've dabbled in games, but I'm no expert. Some reviews mention the book being pretty dense and heavy on social commentary. Is that going to take me out of the story?
Zevin's writing is sophisticated, I'll grant you that, but the social commentary isn't just like tacked on. It emerges really naturally from the characters' experiences. So you've got Sam, who deals with chronic pain from a childhood injury.
Okay.
You have Sadie, who navigates sexism in the gaming industry, among other things. It really adds layers to their journeys without feeling preachy.
That's good to hear. Now, I have to ask about the video game aspect. I get that it's central, but give me some specifics. What kind of games are we talking about here? Is it all very technical?
It's actually quite a mix. The book very cleverly weaves in references to classic games like Oregon Trail and Mario, which will spark some real nostalgia for anyone who grew up with those. But then it gets into the nitty-gritty of creating fictional games, like their first hit, Ichigo. And here's what's fascinating. Even if you're not a gamer, Zevin describes the design process in a way that makes it exciting and relatable. It's about problem solving, collaboration, pushing creative boundaries.
See, that's what hooks me. It's not just about the games themselves. It's about the people behind them. You mentioned Ichigo. What makes this fictional game so captivating?
Ichigo is really a reflection of Sam and Sadie themselves. It's this whimsical, puzzle-based platformer, very visually driven, which speaks to Sadie's artistic talents. But it also has this intricate level design that requires a lot of strategic thinking, showcasing Sam's coding genius. It's really their collaboration that makes it special.
Okay. Their dynamic is definitely intriguing. I've seen them described as often in love, but never lovers. And honestly, that sounds a bit cliche. Does that actually work in the story?
You know what? That's where Zevin surprised me. It's not a simplistic will they, won't they situation. Their connection is messy, it's intense, constantly evolving. There's a lot of unresolved tension and missed opportunities. And yes, other people do enter the picture, which complicates things further, but it feels very real, very human.
I'll admit you're making me want to dive into this book, but before I get too excited, let's address the elephant in the room, the pacing. Some reviewers found the second half a bit meandering. What are your thoughts?
It's true. The second half does shift gears. It becomes more introspective. It focuses on the emotional fallout of some major events in Sam and Sadie's lives.
Okay.
There's less action, more reflection.
Yeah.
But it's necessary for their growth. We see them confront their past choices, grapple with the question of second chances, both in their lives and within the games they create.
You've mentioned second chances a couple times now. Is this a major theme in the book? And how does it tie into the whole video game element?
It's absolutely central. Think about it. In video games, you can die and respawn, retry levels, make different choices, explore alternate paths. Zevin uses this as a powerful metaphor for life. Sam and Sadie are constantly asking themselves, what if we could go back and do things differently? What if we could reset and rewrite our story?
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects, but tell me, are there any other books out there that are similar to this one? Because it sounds pretty unique.
You're right, it does carve its own path. It has the coming-of-age, decades-spanning feel of A Little Life, but with a much lighter tone. There's also the exploration of ambition and creative partnerships that you find in the Interstings. But the video game element and how it's interwoven with these deeper themes, that's what makes Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow stand out. It's fascinating how Zevin takes this idea of resetting and applies it not just to the characters' personal lives, but to their creative process as game designers,
You're right. In a game, you can scrap a level and start over, tweak the mechanics, even change the entire story. It's like having ultimate control.
Exactly. And that's what Sam and Sadie struggle with. They have this vision for what they want to create, but life keeps throwing them curveballs.
Right.
They have to make compromises, face setbacks, deal with creative differences, just like any artist in the real world.
I'm curious, how does the book handle the portrayal of the gaming industry itself?
Mm.
Is it glamorous, cutthroat, realistic?
It's a mix of everything. Zevin captures the excitement of bringing a game to life, that feeling of accomplishment when you overcome a technical challenge or you nail a design element. But she also doesn't shy away from the darker side, the pressure to succeed, the long hours, the sometimes toxic dynamics within development teams, and especially the sexism that Sadie encounters as a woman in a male-dominated field.
You've mentioned Sadie facing sexism a few times. Can you give me a specific example of how that plays out in the story?
Sure. There's this scene where Sadie's pitching a game idea to a group of investors, and it's clear they're not taking her seriously.
Oh,
They interrupt her, make condescending remarks, and focus more on her appearance than the actual content of her pitch. It's frustrating, but sadly realistic. I think a lot of women in creative industries can relate to that.
yeah. Okay, that's disheartening, but it sounds like Zevin handles it with nuance. Now, you mentioned earlier that Zevin's writing style is sophisticated. What stood out to you in terms of her craft?
There's a lot to unpack there. She has this knack for creating these beautifully layered sentences full of imagery, double meanings. But what really struck me was her ability to capture the emotional nuances of human interaction.
Okay.
There's this scene, Sam and Sadie have this huge fight. And instead of describing the shouting match, Zevin focuses on these small details, the way they avoid eye contact, the tension in their bodies, the unspoken words hanging in the air.
Wow.
It's incredibly powerful, emotionally resonant.
That's a great example. It shows how she goes beyond the surface level and really gets into the characters' heads.
Yes, and I think that's why this book has resonated with so many readers. It's not just about the plot or the setting. It's about these deeply flawed, relatable characters trying to navigate the complexities of life, love, creativity.
One thing we haven't touched on yet is the ending. Without giving any spoilers, can you talk about the overall tone and message of the book? Is it hopeful, cynical, bittersweet?
I'd say it's a mix of hope and melancholy. It acknowledges the pain, the heartbreak that life inevitably throws our way, but it also celebrates the resilience of the human spirit. The ending isn't necessarily tied up in a neat bow, but it leaves you with a sense that even when things fall apart, there's always the possibility of rebuilding, finding meaning in the aftermath.
Okay, I'm sold. But before we jump into the final recommendation, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, those classic games like Oregon Trail and Mario. How do those fit into the story? Are they just throwaway references, or do they serve a deeper purpose?
It's more than just nostalgia. Zevin uses those familiar games to illustrate how even the simplest forms of play can spark creativity and connection. There's this beautiful scene where Sam and Sadie, as kids, are huddled around a computer playing Oregon Trail, and it becomes this shared experience that bonds them together. It's a reminder that inspiration can come from anywhere, even the most unexpected sources.
That's lovely. It speaks to that universal experience of finding joy and connection through shared activities, even something as simple as a video game.
That's what's so powerful about this book. It reminds us that those shared experiences, those moments of connection, are ultimately what give our lives meaning, whether it's through playing games, creating art, or simply sharing our stories with one another.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. You've given me a real feel for the book's strengths, its nuances, even some of the potential drawbacks. But for someone who's still on the fence, what's the bottom line? Why should they pick up tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow?
Well,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a light escapist read, this might not be the book for you. But if you're drawn to stories that delve into the complexities of human relationships, the creative process, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, then I think you'll find a lot to appreciate here. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish the last page. It prompts you to reflect on your own life choices and the connections that have shaped who you are.
I love that. It's not just entertainment. It's an invitation to think deeper, to connect with the characters' struggles and triumphs on a personal level. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to that central metaphor of video games as a representation of second chances. It's such a powerful idea. And it makes me wonder, what would I do differently if I could hit reset on certain moments in my own life?
That's the beauty of Zevin's writing. She doesn't provide easy answers. She leaves us with those open-ended questions, encouraging us to grapple with them on our own terms. And I think that's a gift because it's in those moments of reflection, those what-ifs and if-onlys, that we truly begin to understand ourselves and the choices we make.
So beautifully put, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. If you're looking for a book that will challenge you, move you, and stay with you long after you close the cover, then tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow is definitely worth your time.
Yeah.
Happy reading.